I spent this last weekend at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo 2022. I had a really great time in spite of getting sick. I caught a bit of a sniffle. I've taken 2 COVID tests already and they were clean, so it wasn't the Rona. It was just, you get a bunch of people in a room and someone's going to get sick. That's just kind of how it is. I had a great time at the show, saw all the usual kind of stuff. Rather than talking about it, let's actually cut to the chase. No expo coverage is complete without a shot of the line. I arrived pretty early on Saturday, maybe 7:15 or so. So I was in about the first 20 people in the line. The line doesn't look too bad, but that's because it disappears into an overflow room. This is the overflow room on Sunday. I was told that on Saturday, the whole room was full. From the line, of course, I went directly to the vendor area. Why else would I get up so early in the morning on a Saturday? This overview coverage was actually recorded on Sunday, so there were far fewer people than on Saturday. Pretty much all of the detailed coverage of specific things I saw was recorded on Saturday, however. I didn't walk through the whole vendor area in this recording, but I got a pretty big chunk of it. Overall, I'd say the vendor area was about the same size as 2019. A few of the smaller vendors sold all or almost all of their wares on Saturday, so there were some empty tables on Saturday. That seems pretty common at events like this. There were a few tables with a lot of computer stuff. More than usual, I think. And there was a lot of TI-99 stuff. I think that was the only Atari STacy laptop I've ever seen in person. Around the corner are 2 64DD drives. Wow, you don't see those every day.
And are those 64 DDs?
Sure are.
Wow.
Got a Tomy Tudor and a reasonably common Mac SE. Working hard disk 20s, however, are a lot less common. I know that somebody picked that up on Saturday because it was not their Sunday morning. And of course, another TI-99. And a giant pile of Neo Geo NVS stuff. Did see someone haggling with this vendor about this on Sunday, and I'm pretty sure they bought it, but I have no idea what the final sale price was. Did I mention that I saw a lot of TI-99s? I think that was the only Coleco Adam, though. I'd like to get one of those someday, but not today. I've mentioned in previous videos that I really like these old VFD mini arcade games. I had Caveman back in the, I want to say mid-90s, but I'm not sure what happened to it. It's gone now. Got some TI-99 carts here, but no systems at this booth. This A1200 is the only Amiga I saw at the whole expo. It's in the box with a UK power supply. It had a bunch of loose discs, and they were asking way too much for it. Way too much. It was still there on Sunday the last time I went through the vendor area. You got John Riggs here. Oh my goodness. Atari 5200 trackball? Want. Telstar Combat? Want. Telstar Arcade? Also want. I already blown too much of my budget, and I don't have a lot of space for these, so I left them behind. Someone in the local Facebook group posted that they picked up all the Telstar stuff, so at least it went to a good home. For some reason, this lonely C64 looks really sad to me. Anyway, in the background there's an IBM 5160 with the monitor. I decided that if that was still there on Sunday, I'd pick it up, but it was gone. No big surprise there. Here's the mother lode of TI-99 stuff. They have just about everything except the one TI-99 unobtainium upgrade that I want. Oh well. I heard you like sidecar expansions, ... This last TI-99 has a video enhancement necessary to play the Super Mario Bros. Homebrew. I didn't even know either one of those things were a thing. A pair of very clean first generation neGcon controllers, I have one of these, and it will appear in a video, hopefully pretty soonish. This year? Maybe? I don't know. No promises. Well, hello there, kitty. Sorry. Talk about a mother load of expensive import consoles. Look at that Panasonic GameCube in the box. A drool-worthy item for sure. Enough looking at toys I can't buy. Let's look at some toys that I also can't buy. There was a whole side room dedicated to the Sega Saturn. Naturally, a complete game, US game, and accessory collection was on display, along with a bunch of really, really rare console, mostly import console variations. There were so many Virtual On controllers out for people to actually use and play games on. That was really, really great to see. I didn't notice at the time, but this one's even configured for network play. But for me, the real star of the show was the Pluto prototype.
Where they made certain changes. The big ones, the most obvious ones, built-in modem, built-in hard drive. Under the hood it has additional RAM. We're not totally sure what it does. The clock thing, like the language thing, it always works. It's been accurate for 30 plus years. Don't know why. We think maybe the RAM, but we're not sure. Prototype.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, if I'm totally honest, it's a Saturn. But like,
does it just play all retail stuff?
no, it plays all American ones. But we put a satiator in the back just to see what else we could do. That'll make it play Japanese and European stuff. But like natively, it distributes a region locked to the US. And the card slot works, like right there, but it only works with memory.
As usual, the National Video Game History Museum had its own dedicated room. This year they had a beautiful display showing how art went from the artist's hand to the pages of Nintendo Power magazine. This was a really, really well done display. It's easy to forget that back in the day, an artist painted all of those images before they were composited using film to create the final image in the magazine. Some of the images were instead created using models or sculptures or similar things, and a few of those were on display too. There was also a big celebration of everything Pac-Man, not just the video games, but all of the ephemera that was produced along with it. And let's be honest, Pac-Man became a cash cow that would have made George Lucas proud. When I was a kid, I really wanted that Pac-Man board game. Wait, when is National Pac-Man Day? I didn't know about this. Time to express an unpopular opinion here. Even as a kid, I found the Pac-Man Fever song to be annoying. One of the coolest things for me on display were copies and originals of Pac-Man design documents. Awesome, just awesome. The Pac-Man Museum display provides an excellent segue to the next topic. I attended 3 retro game postmortem panels. The first was Steve Golson, Kevin Curran, and Tim Lepetino talking about the development and history of Ms. Pac-Man. Apologies for any horrible name mispronunciations. I saw Steve give a similar talk at GDC in 2016 and a semi-related talk about the Atari 7800 at PRGE also in 2016. Having Kevin on stage with him made a great talk even better. Links to both those previous talks are in the description below. I don't want to completely steal their thunder because I believe PRGE is going to eventually post recordings of all the panels on YouTube, and you should go watch those, but I do need to provide a little bit of background. Now, Ms. Pac-Man began life as a Pac-Man enhancement called Crazy Otto. After the panel, I followed them over to the ground control booth near the arcade area to play Crazy Otto using MAME on Steve's laptop. In the coming weeks, I'm going to do a dedicated video just about that because there is so much to talk about there. It was a truly amazing experience, and I really, really need to thank Steve for sharing his time in that way. It was truly amazing.
Much money. The other thing was that video game copyright law was very unsettled in the world back in 1981. I mean, it was unclear. The Mafia was making outright copies of video games. I mean, identicals. That shamelessly doing that. And there was an assertion by attorneys for the people who all say were organized crime that, you know, the copyright law of the United States applied to a fixed expression in a media. Like when you watch a movie, it plays the same every time. You listen to Hey Jude, it's the same song. Whereas they said, no, with a video game, when you play the game, you're a co-author. And as a co-author, copyright law doesn't apply because your gameplay might be different than your gameplay. And
that's what the Mafia lawyer said.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
it's my guy.
It was very unclear. It's true. It was interesting legal time. Yes.
And
The second panel I attended was Jeremy Parrish talking about the early 8-bit and pre-8-bit history of Sega. I said this in a tweet, but it was really weird seeing Jeremy's face without the RF static. A lot of this material is also available in videos on his channel, which I'll do a card for, which I highly recommend. This sort of condensed, focused version was also really enjoyable.
In 1968-69, they created a game called Duck Hunt, where you had to shoot ducks that would fly out of the grass and a dog was there. Totally a coincidence, I'm sure, that Nintendo created something very similar a few years later.
Finally, I attended Warren Davis's panel about the history of Qbert. Warren gave a talk about Qbert earlier this year at GDC, which I've linked below, and I'm sure there's a good amount of overlap between the two. The story that Qbert was designed by starting with a tiny base concept, then a thing was added, then another, until suddenly there was a game, seems to be a very common path for games of this era. Eugene Jarvis tells a very similar story about the creation of Robotron, for example. I also really liked the tidbit that the Qbert's cursing was created by sending random values to the inputs of a Votrax speech chip. I'd love to have one of those chips to try that experiment with. One of my other favorite parts of PRGE has traditionally been the live auction. I love seeing all the rare and unusual items. This year was no exception in that department. That Sega Genesis display unit cartridge switcher unit is pretty cool. I've seen similar things like that before, and I've often wondered how hard would it be to make a reproduction version of that for personal uses. I really wanted that autographed copy of Shenmue. That Atari 2600 color bar generator would have been a really nice addition to my collection. Too bad I'm not independently wealthy. This year marked a pretty significant change for the PRGE live auction. In previous years, the live auction was held like a traditional live auction where everyone has to register in advance and you get little numbers and you flash the little numbers to bid and all of that. It's normally a very exciting and interactive event. Like, people are invested in watching what's going on. They're invested in looking around the room and like, oh my gosh, who is that who's bidding so much money on this ridiculous item? Oh, and you get into it and it's very intense. This year, however, they moved almost the whole thing to the online auction site Whatnot. And you know, I'll be honest, I didn't hate it, but it was severely muted. Instead of people being involved and interacting, everyone was staring at their phones and was completely disconnected. It was not the event as it normally is. Now I know that's going to make me sound very old. Yeah, you young kids all staring at your phones. Yeah. But I don't I don't quite mean it that way. Like, you know, if you've got a few people in a room and you're bored and you're doing stuff on your phone, like, that's one thing. But when you've got a giant ballroom full of a few hundred people who are just staring at the same thing on their phones, like, that's just weird, right? That is just weird. There were really only two interesting bits, or sort of collections of bits, in the whole of the event. One, there were several items that were local only, either because they were too large, like the giant statue at the very beginning of this footage, and a couple fragile things, and just things that were just so impractical to ship that they were sold locally only. And the, you know, really heartfelt memorial that Chuck Van Pelt gave for Daryl Donner. And, you know, one of Daryl's favorite things about PRGE had been the auction, and Chuck said something that really, I think, sums up my whole feeling about this change to the auction. It's not about the objects, it's about the community. And moving the auction to whatnot completely removed community from the equation. It was gone. There was just nothing. Now, to underscore that, by halfway through the auction, the room was practically empty. Like, people got bored and said, hey, I'm just staring at my phone. I can go stare at my phone from a more comfortable chair. And they left. And what should have been the most exciting auction in the history of PRGE auctions was the complete in-box copy of Stadium Events. Hello? But until like the very end, when people were freaking out that it was going to go for $40,000, like, everyone was asleep. By far the much more interesting auction was the Halo statue, because that was locals only, and everyone was invested in it because it went for quite a lot, and people were looking around the room. Oh my gosh, who's bidding on this? Oh, this is so exciting. Like, that was how the auction was supposed to be. It wasn't like, you know, people half asleep staring at their phones. Okay, that's the end of my rant. I'm really, really hoping that PRGE will go back to the traditional auction format next year. I suspect that they won't, because I'm sure a big part of the reason that they changed to this format is it made things a million times easier for them. And I know that every aspect of this event is a huge amount of work, and I completely respect the massive amount of planning and physical effort that goes into making this event happen and making it fabulous. But it was really, really sad to see this event, in my opinion, make a pretty significant change for the worse. Okay, that's really the end of my rant. I'm done. Did I mention that a complete in-box copy of Stadium Events went for over $40,000? Holy smokes!
43,000. $43,050 to launch the Caveman here. Congratulations. Congratulations, my students. This is a simple congratulations. Josh, congratulations on the amazing sale. We just set the auction record, I think. Thank you so much, and students, you can come pick this up.
I go to ground control in Portland pretty regularly, but I still really enjoy the Retrocade at PRGE. A lot of games that have either weird controls or weird displays show up at the Retro Arcade that don't show up very often at any local arcades. There are also always a ton of pinball machines, and I have a deep respect for the artistry and engineering effort that goes into making a fine pinball cabinet. I especially like vector display games, and there was a good selection at the expo. Major Havoc has both a weird display and weird controls. I'm not good at it, but I love playing it. Those jump mechanics always get me. Of course, Tempest and Battlezone were present in cute little cabaret cabinets. I spent a good amount of time playing Star Castle, which always reminds me that I need to play more Yar's Revenge. Instead of the more common Star Wars arcade, Empire Strikes Back was on display. Hidden away from its other vector display siblings was a lonely Armor Attack cabinet. This game got a console port for the Vectrex and no other platform, and that's a shame. In 2019, I seem to recall that Black Widow was on display, and I played that for hours. I think that's my favorite vector display game. I clearly need more practice filming this kind of thing in dark places because this is really hard to see. Many apologies. I suspect a gimbal or something like that would help. If any of you have any recommendations, please put them in the comments below. I just missed the changing of the DJs, and my friend DJ Switch is back there somewhere. My other most favorite part of the expo is the Classic Tetris World Championships.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Tetris!
Earlier in the tournament, they kept asking the players about live play versus online, and they all dramatically preferred the energy of the live event.
Breaking the record, 14 max outs during the qualifying period.
When the rest of the show ended, they turned on the lights so that people could tear down their boots and all that other stuff. And you could get a good look at just how many people were there to watch the final. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending. Go find the full match on Twitch or wait for it to show up on YouTube. I will say this. It was awesome. Tetrises were scored at levels that just a couple of years ago were thought to be impossible to get to, much less score Tetrises on. The individual and combined scores in a couple of the games were through the stratosphere. So many amazing records will be set. Feel like I say this every year. Can next year's be even more amazing and exciting? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, y'all didn't think that I was going to leave you hanging and not show you what I got at the show, did ya? Jeez, what you must think of me. So I'm just going to kind of go through the things pretty quickly. I picked up a handful of Atari 8-bit computer cartridges. I was mostly interested in Beam Rider. I love this game, and I'm trying to get copies of it for every platform. But the rest of these are good too. Popeye is a great game. It came out for a bunch of platforms, and there are very few of those platforms where it's terrible. I picked up a couple Atari and ColecoVision cartridges. Whoops, not that yet. Getting ahead of myself. Touchdown Football for the 7800 for $3. I couldn't resist. Commando for the 2600. I know this is terrible. And this mystery cartridge on the back is, I did not pay that for it, is Wing War for the ColecoVision. Missing the label. I also know that this is terrible, and that is why I did not pay anywhere near $15 for it. Got some Sega games too. Black Belt for the Master System. The case needs a little bit of cleaning. It does not have the manual, but the cart is there. And then Lightning Force for the Genesis. A really great shooter. I got this for a good price. I was very, very happy to pick that up. Picked up a bunch of PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games. A bunch of flavors of Wipeout. and Namco Museum Volume 1. Now, I picked up all 4 of these because these are games that are supported by that have support for, I guess is the right way to say it, for the neGcon twist controller that I showed earlier in the video. And I'm going to do a video where I want to play through a bunch of the games. There's still a couple that I need to acquire. Unfortunately, the 3 that are left on my list are all Japanese imports. I was really hoping to find some of those at the expo, but I did not, and that was a huge bummer. At the ground control booth, while I was talking to Steve about Crazy Auto, I picked up Tim's book about the history of Pac-Man, and naturally got it autographed by everyone present. This is a fabulous, fabulous book. I've only flipped through it a little bit, but if you are interested in Pac-Man and video game history or any of that, I highly recommend this book. It is really, really well done. And then finally, oh, wait, I missed one that slid off. I also got Congo Bongo for the Atari 2600. The label is pretty rough on it, but that's okay. Now, the last pickup was this. So this is sealed in the box. This is a ridiculous upgrade adapter. When Socket 370 first came out, it was only for Celeron chips. And so early boards that had Socket 370 could only support Celerons. And they had the same voltage and various requirements as the earlier Pentium 2s and Pentium 2 Celerons. So you could get just basically a passive adapter that would let you put one of those Celerons on it and put it in a slot 1 motherboard if you had one of the older slot 1 motherboards. So what this lets you do is, let's see, this guy lets you adapt a Pentium 3 for use in one of those Celeron Socket 370 slots. And presumably, if you have a Slocket adapter, you could put this adapter in that adapter and put a Pentium 3 in one of those, a Socket 370 Pentium 3 in an old slot 1 motherboard. I don't know for sure that this works, but I see no reason why it shouldn't. And that, of course, means I'm going to try it in a video. I'll try it with a crummier flip chip PGA Pentium 3 so that if I burn it up, I won't have to cry myself to sleep. But, for $35, like, what the heck? I could not resist. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I'd already got some of these games came from that same table, and I already was getting ready to make an offer, and then I saw this, and I kind of did a double take. It was like, excuse me? So yeah, I had to get it. All right. I'm still excited about the Classic Tetris World Championships, and that was days ago. And I'll have minor regrets about my old man rant about the auction. I'm sure I'll be over it by next year, and I'll go anyway, whatever the format is, because it's fun. Anyway, until next time, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I tweeted and Instagrammed a whole bunch of stuff while I was at the expo. Not as much as I would have liked to, but that's kind of how it goes. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button if you're interested in seeing future content like this, because I'm going to have some more gaming stuff on the channel, not just old computer stuff. Please click the subscribe button. And until next time, try to remember the good stuff.